Kinden lives in Roddington on the Northern Peninsula. She is president of the White Bay Central Development Association. She has been instrumental in the formation of the Northern Peninsula Development Corporation, the Northern Peninsula East Roads Committee, and Single Mothers Against Poverty.
My family's from here. My mother was born in Griggett and father in Ingalee, so when they got married, they came here to live. They were one of the first families here. I moved away from here when I was 17 and came back, during the period from 17 up to 1977. I got married and had my 3 children, and my husband was with forestry, so he got a job back here. So we moved back here in 1977. I didn't have a job first when I came here, so I was a bit bored, and, my kids were, my youngest was going on 3. So, I don't know, I met up with some friends that wanted me to go to a meeting rural development was having, and figured I should be able to get involved and probably contribute something to it. So I guess that was 1979. Started out by being a subcommittee member. So next year then I went and I ran for, tried to get on the board, which I did. I was vice president of the subcommittee of Roddington. And in the next year, I ran and I became president of the association. There's a nice few women on our board, a few more men now than there used to be, but the president is a woman, and our coordinator is a woman, our secretary, and our treasurer. So the vice president's man, only one. Right here, there's not much for women to socialize in. And this gives us a way of getting out, getting together, and also achieving something. I think every one of the women on our board would like to see our area develop. And I don't think any of us could be described as women's laborers or anything like that. What we want is equality. Equality in the workplace. Equality in jobs. And that's why we put so much into it. We would like to see if there's a heavy equipment operator's job come up, and if a woman is interested, she'd be recognized for it as well as a man. You could go to a list of any of the jobs. We feel that our development association was very instrumental in putting a crab plant here. I was one of the first women to get involved on the committee. The committee was mostly made up of men first, and then they wanted to form a women's committee. So I got involved with that, and I decided that I was going to, at some point, become manager of the plant. I did. I think what really made me determined to become manager of the crab plant was when we were trying to get the plant here. I went to meetings, and there was men there that told me, "What are you doing here? This is something the men is trying to get this plant here, and, we'll work in it, and you'll be only just labor or whatever. The women will be just the labor." That's the way the men felt, I'm sure. And I was told, I was actually told, you're wasting your time at those meetings and trying to get that here because, it's not going to be run by women, and it's not going to be controlled by women, and that was their idea, and we're going to have this here, and we're going to have that here. Why don't you just go home and look out to your kids? Like I told them, I said, don't worry about my kids. My kids are looked out to, and they're fine, and we will get the crab plant, and women will be involved in it. And I said, a woman will run it. Yeah, I guess if you put your mind to something, and I'm the type of person, if someone tells me I can't do it, I'm going to do it, no matter what. It's a good idea, in which we've proven that a lot of our ideas are good. I mean, there's the crab plant. That's the only employment that some women have ever had around there, and the only employment they will ever have. Now there's the Oidra site up here. I mean, that's a big thing, and we pushed at that till we got it. That has to benefit the area great. I mean, the woods industry is what we want to revive, and that's what it's going to do. I mean, the construction jobs after a year, there's not really much to that, you know. But I'd say we'll see the woods industry get off the ground from the wood chips. And that was what it was meant to do in the beginning, so if it does that, we'll have achieved what we went for. In this area, women are deprived because there's not much work. You know, they're really disadvantaged in terms that they have to take labor because there's nothing else for them to do. A lot of us as young girls, for whatever reason, like, didn't further our education. Could be family situation, anything. Even, like, say, the school system wasn't very encouraging then, probably 3 or 4 grades in one classroom, and you wanted to just get out and make some money and buy yourself some nice clothes, whatever the reason, you know. You didn't further your education, you went out and you got a job, and then probably ended up marrying and having your family. And now you find your family is growing, you have time. Basically, you got the intelligence to do it, but you haven't got the facility. And if the woman can't go to the facility, we would like to bring the facility to them. Our development association right now, myself and Barb and a couple of the others, is putting together a course with Bay St. George College where we could get women to do the basic skills in, like, typing, computers, and all that. And that's a program we hope gets approved because it's going to help a lot. May even motivate some of them to go elsewhere and further their education. I recently formed a local group called White Bay Central Single Moms, and I must say they got off to a pretty good start. They sponsored a program last year, and they don't have a lot of members, but it is a new thing for the area and something that I'm going to see work in the future. What drives us to get those things is because we sit back and we look and we see, we travel out and we see things in other areas, and it's not in our area, so we push to get it there. We're disadvantaged in a lot of ways, like medical services, education, recreation. You can name any of it, right on down to our gravel roads. Everything is a disadvantage. You're living in an isolated community. And if we can help, you know, we are trying. I would really encourage any woman that's in a community like this to, you know, sit down and probably just take a look at the community and see if there's something they can do, even if it's just a knitting group or sewing or whatever. It helps to get out and become active because it leads to other things. You know, there's a lot of women with potential that just sit home and think maybe I can do it. You know, if you think maybe you can do it, you can do it. If you got that much drive to think that I can do something other than sit home, I'd say 100% sure. If you're thinking it, you can do it, whatever it is. Basically, I was a bit shy. Like, first when I started, and even now, if I have to speak in public, I'm nervous, you know. Not being trained to do public speaking in school was a disadvantage. The most you ever got a chance to do in school was, say, present when the teacher called the roll in the morning, you know. I mean, you never spoke out. If you said anything out of line, you were told to shut up. And that's a disadvantage. When I started with Development Association, I certainly didn't have knowledge on the things that I have now, but when something comes up, you read up on it, you go attend a meeting, you get involved in discussions, and then gradually your intelligence and your knowledge of something builds, and that helps. I mean, what I found was the past 10 years, I've talked on things and got involved in things that I would never think that I would be involved in, and you know, everything you get involved in is a learning experience, you know, no matter what it is. There was one time when we went to Plum Point, and there was some government people coming in, and they tried to evade us. So what I did was I took my car and I went down and Mr. Rumpke was the man that we were trying to get to meet. So when he got off the helicopter, I went up to him and I said, "Do you have a car for today?" And he said, "No, I'm waiting for someone to come pick me up now." And I said, "Well, if you don't mind riding in a little yellow Toyota, I'll be your transportation for today." So that's what we did. I put him in my car. Celie was with me, and him and his assistant took the back seat, and we had him for the whole day, riding him around to all his meetings and everything. And whenever we got a chance, we talked to him about what we wanted done or the money that we needed or whatever. And I would say that was, you know, important point there to do something like that. I never thought I would have the nerve to do that, but I did it. I don't really think of myself as a leader. I don't know, maybe I am, but from all of this that I've done, you know, like say with working in the plant, working with the Development Association, being involved with the public in general, what I've gained out of it is I've gained an identity. Like, I've come to know myself as a person who can be aggressive if I want to be. If I want to be quiet, I can be quiet. And the term I use a lot is sometimes you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar. So you got to know when to be honey and you got to know when to be vinegar. You work things in. I'd say from all of this I've learned how to organize myself and my life and whatever a bit better, you know, like. And certainly the help that I get from my family is good, because if I have to attend meetings and there's something that has to be done at home, I have help there. Well, you need that family support. We need that, and I doubt if all women get it. You know, you need it. If you don't, you know, you got to have somebody supporting you and pushing you, because after all, we're only human, and there is times when you want to throw it down. And if somebody will say to you, "Look, what you're doing is great," and somebody is going to benefit from it either now, next week, or 10 years down the road. If somebody can identify that in what you're doing and give you the little bit of a push that you need to go out and do it, I'd say it's required. If you're content at home and that's the life you want and that's what makes you happy, do it. Because we certainly need women at home. But if you're not content at home and you want a home life and you want a work life and you want a public life, if you want it and you can handle it, do it. Oh, women can play any role they want. If you want to be a carpenter, a ditch digger, politician, a doctor, a lawyer, if you want it and you want it bad enough, you can do it.
Is the president of the Fogo Island Cooperative Society, one of the largest cooperatives in the country. She is also an executive member of the board of directors of the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Cooperatives.
I had a pretty normal life. My father worked with the Department of Forestry in that community. And I went to school in a Roman Catholic school in our community there. It was a small school. And I went to high school at Smallwood Academy, which was an integrated school in Dark Cove, which is another part of Gambo. During my high school years, I was involved in different groups, such as cheerleaders, a member of the student council, that type of thing. My involvement with the student council and our freedom to mix with our teachers and this type of thing and express our opinions and make them see things from our point of view, I think certainly helped in the earlier years. And then when I got into a working atmosphere, it made me feel comfortable with my supervisors and managers, this type of thing, in that I was never afraid to express my opinion. I met my husband when I was going to trade school there, and of course our relationship built from there. I worked at unemployment insurance, and he was an electrician employed in Gander. And my husband is the type of person who has always been involved in the activities here on the island. And after a few years, we consciously made a decision that we would like to move back here, that it would be a nice community to raise kids in. And he came back to the fishery, and I came back to work with the co-op. And it's worked out well. Like any community, there is very little outside involvement here. I mean, there's no theaters or malls and this type of thing that you can visit to entertain yourself. So in those small communities, you'll find the most involvement people have are in the different volunteer organizations that they have. So until you get out and become part of the community and get involved in those things, you will find life difficult. You'll find trouble adjusting. But I must say, after the first year I was here, and once I started work at the co-op, and I was involved in the community with the different altar society and with the fireettes, and you mix in the community, and that's what your life becomes. You become part of the volunteer organizations and support groups that are there for your community. I received a call to go to work in our groundfish operation in Jobats Arm, and the reason I was employed there was they had put in a new incentive system in that plant, and they needed someone for costing. So I was looking after the incentive program and a cost clerk there. First, when I went there, of course, I knew very little about fish, different species and the different terminology, and it took me about a year to adjust to that type of work. And of course, working in a plant itself, because my office is inside the plant, that was an adjustment to make, to say the least. But I really enjoyed my work there. The work there is interesting. In high school I was strong in math and this type of thing, so I like costing and I like the involvement in the plant and can see what's actually happening. When I worked in Jobats Arm, I never come home to lunch. I always stayed to lunch there. And during lunch breaks, there would be different members that worked in the plant would come in, some of the cutters or trimmers or whatever, and some of the foremen and floor ladies were there, and we would always get into a conversation about what was happening in the co-op at the time, the issues that we were involved with at the time. And we used to have some very good conversations. And people, later in the fall, when it came to time when we were talking about the annual meeting coming up, this type of thing, people used to pass a remark, I mean, you should run for the board. And I never took it seriously until I did go to the annual meeting in November when they held it. And one of the guys who worked in the plant looked back and said, "Will you run?" And I nodded my head, and he nominated me, and I was elected, which was very surprising for the first time, and the first woman on the board. And I think there were a few people shocked at the meeting that night, A week later, I received a call to go to my first board meeting, and from there it went on. The first year I went on the board, I was elected as secretary. I think that came normally from the fact that I was a woman and they felt that I should hold the pen and keep the minutes. When the annual meeting was held the next fall and the executive were elected for the board, I had been approached by a lot of the board members before to run for president. And I was very apprehensive of taking the position at that time. My husband was very apprehensive. But I finally made up my mind that I would, and I had the full support of the board. Right from the beginning, I became very involved in different situations. Like, for instance, in the actual operation of the co-op, I was familiar with that from my job in the plant. I was familiar with all the things that contributed to the costing in our groundfish operation. I was familiar with all the species, different fishermen that came in the office during the day. I had different conversations with longliner fishermen and small boat fishermen, this type of thing. So I was very familiar with the operations of it. I had close contact with the workers, and of course I could see the fishermen's view because my husband was a fisherman and because I was involved with fishermen on the board. So I could see it from both angles. Well, I feel that you can't talk to the membership at large and contribute and express your opinion without knowing the business. So in order to be effective in a leadership role, you have to have a good idea of the whole operation. Because here we are, we're sitting here on Fogo Island, and we're a cooperative. You have a board of directors who are governing it, and we're very vulnerable. We're fishermen and plant workers, and if we don't get the knowledge ourselves and build our own knowledge, we won't have any knowledge. You're afraid of what the involvement will do to your family life, for one thing, how drastically it will change it. And I think at this point in time, I don't think it has changed. It has added to our family life. I relied a lot on my husband. I must say, I think he was very supportive of me and very good. He filled in many, many nights babysitting. His parents live next door, and I have to give them credit. They've really supported us, and there's times that we've gone off the island to meetings and this type of thing that they've taken care of the kids. And of course my parents. We've often went to meetings in St. John's and dropped my kids off on the way, this type of thing, for weekends. And they've all been supportive of us.
Has that kind of support sort of been crucial to your...
Yes, it has, because one thing that you have to be is comfortable that your children are taken care of, you know. It's like anyone with small kids, if you're working or whatever, or no matter what your involvement is, it's always something that's on your mind. And if you go to a meeting and can't rest, I think one of the most important things that you learn in family life that you bring into a position is your ability to compromise. I mean, in a family, you have to compromise with your husband and your kids and the hours you work and the free time you have on your hands, this type of thing. So, I mean, in a position of leadership, you need to be able to compromise and be willing to, in some cases, I suppose, swallow your pride when you recognize that you've made a bad decision or whatever. And I think that comes from the home, a lot of it. And bringing that to a leadership role is definitely beneficial, in my opinion. I have to wonder about my style of leadership, especially in most recent years. I am a person who is very vocal. When I have an opinion, I like to express it. And in many ways, I'm an aggressive person. And I think in that way, as being chairman of the board, I take a leadership role, an aggressive role, and I think that that has changed from the style that used to be to a certain degree. But I wonder what kind of a tone I'm setting for future years for new leaders that are coming in. You always have to question your own tactics and wonder if you're right or wrong in many situations. But I follow my mind. I try to be as honest as I can, answer any questions that are asked with honesty, and feel confident in my own mind and that the decisions I've made are the right ones and I've made them for the right reasons. And so I think I feel comfortable with that, and it may not be the ideal leadership role, but it's what I feel comfortable with. I think over the last couple of years there's been a lot of change. There was a second woman on the board for the past year and a half. At the last election, there was a runner-up, a woman. So people are becoming more vocal, and I've noticed the first annual meetings that I've attended, there was very few women in the audience. Now you go and you will see that there is a good many women that will attend the annual meeting, and our community meetings, because we go through a process where we have meetings in each community before the annual meeting, and you would never see a woman to those meetings. And now you do. People are more or less coming out of their shell and realize that they are members of the co-op and they have a right to go and express their opinions, and they're becoming involved. I know how I felt before I got on the board, and there was a community meeting in Tilting of the Fogo Island Cooperative, and I wouldn't go up to that meeting because I probably would be the only woman there. Now they know there's a woman there, so you know they're not going to be the only one, you know. So I think that probably broke the ice for them in the beginning, and I feel a lot more comfortable now when I walk into the room and I'm not the only woman there. And I've walked into many rooms where I have been the only woman. I've been involved in one of the most male industries that there is, I suppose, the fishing industry, but I don't feel uncomfortable, and I don't think that I should be recognized as, well, she's a woman type of thing. You know, I feel if I have the knowledge, I should fill whatever position that knowledge allows me to fill. For a lot of women, just to become involved in, for instance, to be elected to the board or to run for the board is a big step. But there's a lot of little steps to take before you get to that point. I mean, if you work in the plant, you're involved with your fellow workers, and just discussions on issues that are important to you, and just being willing to discuss the issues and come up with some suggestions, and not be afraid to approach your foreman or your floor lady or probably your manager, and just to express an opinion, you know. Just building up that self-confidence in yourself, and eventually you'll get to the point where you'll say, yes, I'm willing to run. And there are women on our island now that are willing to run, who have ran, and I think there's certainly been a breakthrough. In the situation that we're involved in here on Fogo Island, we have consciously made a decision. The decision was made 20 years ago when the people here refused resettlement and decided that they were going to make a life of their own, and they started their own cooperative. The cooperative here on this island is our lifeline. We have to protect the jobs in our plants, and we have to do everything in our power to protect our fishermen. So therefore, if there's decisions being made or things happening that you are dissatisfied with, you have to become actively involved yourself to change them, because this belongs to us all, and we are all responsible for running it. And anyone who is willing to be aggressive enough to take on the challenge to run for the board of directors and make a contribution, they should, because they are contributing to their own future and the future of their children.